welcome to the RealEDGE podcast. Marc and I are excited to have Diego Sanchez, the president of HousingWire, on with us today. It's the perfect time to be talking to Diego because there are literally, if not hour by hour, sometimes minute by minute updates that change the landscape for the American homeowner, for our industry. And Marc and I are excited to have you here, Diego. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be on with you guys. And the timing is great because in a couple of weeks, we're going to be in Dallas talking about housing economics at our Housing Economics Summit, which you have partnered with us on. So I think the timing is wonderful in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we're excited to be coming down for the content and obviously to be supporting it. But you're right, we get lucky. We get a preview here. We get a little foreshadow. And who knows, some things will change by the time we get there in late February as well.
No doubt.
So Marc, one of the things that I think piqued your interest, and one of the things you and I have talked about a lot, is how much executive in this industry need to be focused on rates and how much do they need to be focused on other things. And so we've gone back and forth as an industry, I think, similar to how rates move and the market moves, kind of our industry moves and focuses on different things at different times. Can you kick us off with just sort of a quick overview of how you think or how you often talk to executives or how you think about managing to rates versus managing to other variables, other key metrics in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to continually watch the rate, but we don't control it. Diego and I don't control it. We could sit there and have all our, we can pontificate rates all day long. Someone's going to be right, someone's going to be wrong, or there's going to be somewhere in the middle between all of this that's going to shake out. No one was ready for a 3.25, a 2.75 in 2020. No one was ready for the almost 8%, 7%, 8% when it skyrocketed. And now we've been in this 3.5 year run of where is it going? Where is it going to land? Where is it going to normalize? And I think the biggest thing is being ready for whatever it is that's out there, whether that be, okay, there probably will still be some consolidation this year. There's probably going to be some things that are out of all of our controls. The one thing I'd say is that no matter what, if you're in title, appraisal, mortgage, you control what you can, which is how do you get market share and how do you become successful and how do you manage your business, right? Diego and I could have a laugh about what we think this administration is going to do, but I don't think that really matters no matter what. We just got to be prepared. If they go into the fives, be prepared. If they stay where they are, be prepared. And if they go up, be prepared. Preparation is the only thing I think any of us could really try and figure out, but being prepared for whatever the market gives to us is what I say.
Diego, what do you hear from leaders in the industry? So you interview them as well as have incoming calls and texts and questions coming from those leaders. What rings true for you as are like the top things that leaders care about?
Yeah, I mean, I think Marc makes a great point about rates. I think it's really important, and I know that executives are focused on the rates. I think it's really important to know what are the triggers that are going to move rates in either direction, right? Like really understand the interaction between 10-year treasuries and rates, inflation and rates, fiscal policy and rates, what the Federal Reserve is thinking about. But at the end of the day, Marc's so right. Like we can't control it. And so, there are executives who are always focused on growth and who are going to grow no matter what. And there are executives where rates or other issues in the housing market can cause them to go into more of a defensive posture. So, frequently when I talk to executives, I really like to have the executives on my show, Powerhouse, that are growing no matter what. No matter what rates are doing, no matter what inflation is doing, no matter what housing inventory is doing, they're focused on growth. If it's an expanding pie, they're growing. If it's a shrinking pie, they're taking share from their competitors. So those are the folks that I really like to focus on.
Yeah, you reminded me of a lesson when I moved to Detroit. It was for a job at Quicken Loans. And Dan Gilbert would often say, how do we put ourselves in a position that when everyone else is contracting, when everyone else is shrinking, that's when we hit the gas. That's when we grow. And so it sounds a lot like what you're saying. When you see the top movers and the top producers in this industry, that's their mindset as well. You kind of reminded me of that from Dan many years ago.
Yeah, and I've had some really interesting folks that I've spoken with recently, including the new CEO, relatively new CEO of Rocket, and he's definitely somebody that is growing no matter what. Very focused on it. You know, I've had several of the big servicers, CEOs from the big servicers on recently, and it's really interesting how they think about growth, right? You know, when rates are high, like right now, the value of the MSRs in their book are doing really well. Like they're happy. When rates decline, they've built a business that allows them to originate from their book. So again, they're happy, right? And so I think that there are lessons from that for more, you know, executives across the industry, whether it's mortgage, title, real estate. You know, build a business and try to structure your business so that no matter what happens in the things that you don't control, there are going to be some positive outcomes for you.
Yeah. Marc, how often do you think, you know, you need to be looking at those indicators, those flags, and meeting with your team? You know,
I think that's a double-edged sword, because how often should you versus how often do we all, right?
Yeah.
So I think the reality of it is that we all look at it like it's a Christmas present under the tree, going, what's in it? And we're trying to figure out what's in it every day. But the reality of it is the indicators, like you could drive yourself nuts in this environment right now, what those indicators are like, because there's no constant right now. And the one thing I would say is, even if you look at how we used to predict rates is not how we're going to be predicting rates this year or next year. There's too many things that are not normal right now, and there's too many things with this administration that are really abnormal right now, right? And I think that's where the banter comes back and forth, which is, you know, historically we go, okay, like Diego said, unemployment, inflation, this, and this, and those are indicators. They've always been good indicators, but there's definitely things right now that we don't normally look at as indicators that say, okay, maybe we should look at those a little bit more heavily, because that could dictate where this environment's going.
Yeah. So do you find that, at least from your experience at Silk Title in particular, that you have a slight advantage because you have business partners giving you their indicators as well? So you get to see kind of where volume is slotting in? Or do you find that that's not enough time? The amount of time a business partner can give you a heads up that their volume's increasing is essentially the exact same time you'd find out about it. And so you're trying to stay ahead just like they are? Or do you see that data sharing or some of the other technology tools will help business partners, will help lenders and real estate agents, will help title companies actually kind of be better positioned to capitalize?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I think I'm in a more unique circumstance than just owning a title company, right? So yes, I get this feedback from clients and everything else, but I own a lot more than just Silk Title. Therefore, what I have information to, I don't necessarily have to rely on those clients and prospects for, which makes it a little bit more unique, right? And I'm able to drive it through some of the other companies and the data and the information, which allows us to sit there and say, okay, part of the thing that made Silk more unique is because of that, we also knew who the players were that understood certain things, where, you know, I remember back in my younger days, it was like you just went after everybody, the shotgun approach. But the problem is, in environments over the last 3 years, some of those shotgun approach people don't even exist anymore, right? And then all of a sudden you spent all your time, energy, effort, and money going after what you perceived in 2020 was the right client because they had volume then. And now all of a sudden you're like, well, what just happened, right? And those are some of those indicators that you got to start looking at and being perceptive to certain things, because, you know, what type of business does somebody do? Are they doing purchase? Are they doing cash out refi? Are they doing HELOC? How are they getting their business, right? So those are things that change that dynamic, Jeremy, that it's, yes, listening to clients and prospects, very, very useful, but then also understanding the data behind certain things and how it's operating. And then also looking at who's losing loan officers. That's a huge one right now, is who's losing them because of their internal operations not being able to actually fulfill or have the lead generation or the business coming in, right? So there's a lot of things that you can look at. And if you study that, and instead of studying the 10-year bond every day, but start looking at what else is out there and understanding, you'll really be able to dive into where you can become successful, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Diego, that sounds a lot like how HousingWire looks at this combination of data, breaking news, deeply reported or embedded news from the industry and kind of putting it together. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what Marc said and how is that reflected in how you look at this toolkit?
Yeah, I love what Marc just said. He's thinking about the housing industry beyond just from the title perspective. And I think that that is really, really important. And that's really how we've been trying to structure our company and our newsroom and really everything that we publish since I joined HousingWire over 6 years ago. We think about it as all things housing. There are things that happen in mortgage that should be very interesting to the folks who work in real estate. There are things that happen in title that should be very interesting to the people that in mortgage and real estate, and vice versa, right? And if you look at a lot of the big companies in housing, they don't think about each of those verticals in silos. They think about what's happening across the entire business. So as an example, we had some very interesting and disruptive real estate commission lawsuits in 2024 that completely changed the game for a lot of the folks who are partners to LOs and title agents, right? And the way that the buyer broker agent is getting compensated is really changing, and I think will ultimately lead to a lot of those folks potentially washing out of the industry, or doing something else with their time. And so it's really important for LOs and title agents to be aware of what's going on with their partners, to either help them or know who to partner with, right? Because
Yeah, you said it, right? Like, what's
Yeah.
the statistic now? 72% of the real estate agents actually didn't do a deal last year.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
the 80-20 rule almost just came into effect.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at it, we track the top agents, team leaders, and brokers every year through our Real Trends business, and we do rankings. And I think it's going to be 5% of agents are going to do 95% of the deals in 2025. I think when we look backwards in 2026, it's going to be pretty close to that. And so again, that flight to quality, you have to know about that if you're in lending or you're in title or you're in valuation, because your partners are going through some stuff. And you either need to help them or partner with the right agents who are going to stay.
Yeah, and it's nice to be able to fall back on the data because for so long, I think people fell back on reputation or fell back on word of mouth or some other things that were harder or impossible to quantify or to know. And in this time of whatever disruption, I mean, I hesitate to use that word. You saw me hesitate because it gets overused a lot in innovation and tech in my world. But I think that what we're talking about here is also consolidation. This industry has resisted consolidation for a really long time. It's a highly localized industry. We kept saying, oh, the small and mid-sized guys are going to go away. If you go back even further, it was the mortgage brokers going to go away coming out of the global financial crisis. But what we're seeing now, it sounds like in the data, is there is consolidation. Fewer loan originators, loan officers is what Marc said. Fewer real estate agents is what you said. How are you seeing that play out in your audience, Diego? How are you seeing that play out in what you're hearing throughout the industry? Are the big getting bigger? Is that what the headline is?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I would call it a flight to quality and a professionalization. And so, I think we will see things get less fragmented. However, at the same time, if you think about what's happening in the wholesale channel, in mortgage lending, there are more people who are becoming mortgage brokers, and that channel is growing. And so, while you might see some consolidation in distributed retail, and certainly among the servicers, they're really consolidating. And if you look at that wholesale channel, it's sort of the opposite trend. But I would say in general, professionalization and flight to quality. And, I think that ultimately is a really, really good thing, right? If you think about what's best for the consumer, I think what is best is that they work with two really professional and trusted advisors during the most important transaction that they're going to do in their life, right? For most home purchases, it is the biggest transaction for the family that is going through it. And how great is it that the advisors that are helping them through that transaction are getting better and more professional and can offer better advice.
Marc, that's one of the things that comes up a lot when we talk about technology. We think a lot about how do I make experts more expert? How do I do more and I'll say better work? And how do I empower my team better? But that also comes at a tension, right? There's a tension between the cost of people and the cost of really high quality technology. Like, we're seeing all the ways that technology, particularly AI and other efficiencies, will jumpstart a business, will accelerate outcomes. But you have to develop some pretty sophisticated and I think some pretty high quality technology to do what Diego's saying and to compete at the highest level with the highest quality, most sophisticated providers. So as you're thinking about, like, one hand, we're talking about volatility, and on the other hand, we're talking about a significant investment to stay relevant, stay current, and then stay ahead of the competition. How are you thinking about that? And then how would you advise the audience listening to think about it?
It's funny you said that, because when everyone thinks bigger means more, right? And everyone goes, oh, I'm bigger. And it's like, okay, are you bigger? What is it? Let's identify what that is. Is it more people? Are you just doing more loan volume? Back in the day, as we're bigger, we had 10,000 people, right? Well, you could be big and have 2,000, and you can have somebody who's doing 10,000. They do the same, but they're less profitable, right? And I think some of this really came down to who did what during profitability during their COVID years. Like, who did what? Did you take that profitability and line your pockets? Did you take that profitability and invest it back into your company? Did you have the foresight to see what technology was going to be? One of the things that's coming up right now is some of those companies went out and just acquired. And I'm not just talking about mortgage companies. I'm talking about tech companies. And now you're staring down a barrel of what could be perceived as some monopolies about to happen, right? And that could, everyone wants to talk about, mortgage and commissions and everything else. What no one wants to talk about, though, is that big elephant in the room, which is, okay, are these acquisitions and technology players going to drive up the cost because they got somewhat of a monopoly, right? And everyone doesn't want to talk about that because, ooh, the big boy is they're gonna take you out of the mix if you talk about them, right? And notice how I'm not saying who they are, but I think we all know who they are. But that is reality too. And you got to be able to say, okay, how do you navigate that too? It's not just about a people acquisition. It's what are you doing technology wise and how are you making partnerships within that? And then are you looking at that variable within it too?
I'd love to jump in on that because some of the most interesting conversations that I've had with executives over the past couple of months are with folks who are thinking about that exact issue, Marc, where it's like, whoa, there are some really big platforms now that control 50, 60, 70% of whatever their market is. And, these executives are like, oof, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense for my business. And I'm seeing, especially executives in mortgage lending, really think a lot more and start executing on building their own platforms.
Yep.
Now, we would expect that from the Rockets and the UWMs of the world, but it goes beyond that. There are a lot of folks, probably still in the top 20, 30 HMDA lenders who are, maybe I need to build out more of a proprietary stack so I am not so beholden to these potential monopolies.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough call. In everything I have to think about and everything I have to spend money on and where I am in the market, to then also say, and how do I get good at technology? You used to hear companies say, I'm a technology company that does mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it kind of went away.
Yeah.
Because it became so obvious how hard and complex mortgages were,
Yeah.
that we've seen that kind of go away. And so now we're adding a whole nother area of tension to that executive mindset to say, all right, now I have to think about where my weaknesses are, or vulnerabilities, I guess is the way you would say it, for these vendor partners or these platforms, because I don't want to just keep getting squeezed on cost. It's expensive enough as it is.
Absolutely. And, just looking at the HousingWire business, obviously we're not
Yep.
a mortgage lender, but in media, there are some tech providers who have really, taken over some of the processes and technologies and platforms that we use on a day-to-day basis to be successful. And so, we don't want to become a technology company that does media, but I think we are becoming a good media company that knows about technology and has in-house technology that we're building and supporting, because it's similar to what these lending executives are thinking. I just don't know if I can be beholden to long-term potential monopolies, right? And also, not only that, sometimes those platforms can't customize in a way that you need to without you spending a lot of money for you to be able to run your business the way you want to run it.
Not only that, but you actually spend the same amount of money as if you were to build it yourself that you would customizing somebody else's platform. And then what did you end up with? Unless you're laying it on that you could eventually take it away and move it into your own platform, which is a strategy. Sometimes it's like, okay, and we know the behemoth out there that everyone spends millions of dollars upgrading their own, something that's not theirs, just to say, okay, well, I got a customized version of it. Well, you still can't go take that code and go somewhere with it. It's still not really yours unless you're layering it on. But Diego, the other piece of this is, I think technology is one piece of it, but wouldn't you also agree data analytics is also something that drives HousingWire? Because I know it drives my companies, right? At the end of the day, it's not, everyone used to think, oh, it's tech. Well, no, it's not just tech. Data analytics and what you do with that tech and what we do and how you go market and where you go with it, that's a strategic strategy that's much different than just, hey, I'm going to hire a bunch of LOs or salespeople at title and throw them around the US and build the relationship. Yes, you need to build that relationship, but how do you get to that relationship? And then where do you build off of it? Right? They're two totally different things. Where we used to drive to say, okay, we got technology and that's going to help drive business. That was an early 2000s mentality into 2010. Now, if you're just relying on that, everybody's relying on that.
Yeah. Data, that's probably been our single biggest priority and focus over the past year and a half. Really, actually 2 years, ever since we acquired a business called Altos Research, where we discovered the power of integrating data into our news, into our analysis, and it really into everything that we do. And when it's proprietary data, even better, right? Because people will pay to access that, especially if you do a good job analyzing it and breaking it down for folks. Yeah, data is super important. We're spending a lot of time thinking about it for sure.
I'd love to ask a couple more questions about what else you're seeing and thinking about. So in my way of thinking about this, people will say, if you ask them, oh, I'm sick and tired of hearing about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. But then when you see the data, that's the highest click story or that's the highest click video. So they don't always tell you the truth about what they may have that interest or that rumor, that gossip, that guilty pleasure. I mean, Marc and I know, like, we talk a lot about deals, right? And deals always get a lot of attention because they're sexy and people want to click on the M&A and the deal. What is the data showing you? What's been surprising to you, or what are some things that are top of mind that this industry is actually interested in? Not what they say they're interested in, but what gets the actual focus?
Yeah, so we track, as you can imagine, we track what our audience is engaging with, and actually what's not just that, because you can drive a lot of traffic to a story, but then there's no meaningful impact, right? They don't subscribe to your newsletters. They don't convert to a paid subscription. They don't buy tickets for your events. They don't end up doing anything that actually has long-term value, for your business. And so there are articles where it's sort of, the eye candy articles or clickbait that drive a lot of traffic, but it's very low calorie or I guess high calorie,
Yeah.
however you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Traffic, and it doesn't do anything for you. And so the things that the topics that do things for us, where people convert on, they subscribe to our newsletters, they check out a webinar, whatever it is, they move down the funnel with us. People probably won't be surprised at the topics that resonate the most with folks. It is mortgage rates and understanding what they're doing and what are the triggers that move them up and down. It is housing market data, and not just giving the numbers, but unpacking what it means on a national level, and then digging into the regions and even localities, because we all know real estate is local at the end of the day. And what the data is in Florida might be very different from what the data is in New York, for example, especially right now. And so housing market data and analysis is huge for us. And then corporate strategy. And so that includes M&A, but it's also like, how are people planning to grow in the coming year or in the coming years? Who are they hiring that's strategic? Corporate strategy is the other topic that really moves the needle. And then I'd say the fourth is meaningful regulatory and DC issues that impact your business. And I think you have to, the articles that convert for us are the ones that kind of lay it out for people and analyze, what does this actually mean for your business, right? As opposed to just saying, such and such a regulation came into effect. No, what does it mean? And how does it impact your business? So those are the four things that really seem to move the needle for us in terms of people converting down the funnel.
Yeah, that was Mark. That was one of the current events this week that caught my attention was, the CFPB got a "don't do any work this week" email, and then appointed like what I would say is a pretty sophisticated housing expert to be and housing finance expert to be the director. And so between Monday and today, you basically had a bunch of people saying, there's like all this change. And I think my response, and Mark, what you and I were talking about was like, what are you changing? What are you gonna do that's different? You spent all this money standing up all of these disclosures and all this compliance. You're just all of a sudden gonna start ripping people off? It's like, that doesn't make any sense, especially now, as the week progresses, we find out that there is a head, and Jonathan McKiernan knows quite a bit about housing finance. So that's a pretty good example of how short the news cycle gets. And I know, Mark, you're often saying, just wait and see. Wait till you see what's going to happen, rather than reacting in the moment.
Yeah, Mark, it's interesting. Our lead analyst, Logan Motashami, is very much in that and just wait and see camp. So I think you and him are probably pretty aligned. I find it really hard to wait and see. And that's probably like my news and media background. It's
Diego, part of it's your news background, but also think about this. This is the first time in 4 weeks of a new administration that this much has been going on this quickly, right? Whether it's good, bad, right, wrong, or whatever, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, green, purple, whatever. The reality of it is this is the first time there's been this much going on. Whether you agree with it or not, that creates a really uncertainty of how to analyze it, right? And I mean, think about it. You have America, you have hostages coming back, you got tariffs going up, you got this, you got CFP. I mean, you couldn't imagine 4 weeks what's happening this quickly and say, okay, where is it going to come out at the end? Now, there's some insights that could say, okay, where it's coming out. Okay, what's going to happen to Fannie and Freddie? We could sit here and debate very quickly, easily on what's going to happen with it. It's absolutely going IPO. It's not even a question whether it's going IPO. It's a matter of when it's going IPO.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, right. That is probably another good bet that we should put in place. No, but I agree that the pace of change has been very, very accelerated. I do have concerns at times that it can be perceived as chaos. And when I think about the bond market in particular, I don't think bond investors like chaos and volatility that much. And then if you think about mortgage rates and you think about that spread between mortgage rates and the 10-year treasury, that spread is really tied to things like volatility and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And those spreads can widen when you have this much going on. And then you've got a spending freeze on Monday, it's rescinded on Tuesday, it's back in effect on Wednesday, and then they're completely called off on Thursday. That can be a little bit too much volatility, in my opinion, for the bond market.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I spent some time in the capital markets, and anything uncertain gets priced that way, right?
Yeah.
And so the more you can't know, or the more you don't know, or the more you believe it will change, the more you're going to bake in some of that cushion, and that's what drives a lot of that you're talking about.
And I want Marc to win our bet on mortgage rates. I would love for rates to be in the high fives by the end of this year, because I think that unlocks maybe the perfect housing market, right? Where it's not too hot, but it's not cold like it is right now. And so I would love to see that happen. It's hard for me to see it happening when I see the volatility and then some of the potential inflationary policies. When we already have inflation that is exceeding where the Fed wants to be. So that's my big concern, is like, are we doing the right things when it comes to keeping that bond market settled down, and keeping those mortgage rates either steady or hopefully declining.
Yeah. For everybody that didn't follow us on LinkedIn, I'll just quickly summarize it. But the bet, friendly wager that mortgage rates will be in the high fives, low fives. Was there an exact 5 handle by the end of the year? Is Marc's side of the bet. And Diego, I like to call that the emotional hedge, which is to say, you get dinner out of it even if you lose the bet, right? We're all going to steak dinner. We're all going to steak dinner even if we lose the bet. So
totally.
Either way, we're in great shape. But I did want to end on something related to this, which you and I have kind of bonded over, engagement. Engage with our colleagues, engage with the audience, engage on LinkedIn, engage everywhere. And know that everybody sees the world the same way around engagement. And I was just curious, like, how have you used those tools to learn more about the industry? How have you used LinkedIn to find out more about what readers care about, what subscribers care about, what events you should craft?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your approach and just like what other, what might benefit other people from thinking the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I joined HousingWire, I'd been a long time in media, but I was really new to housing. And, besides owning a home, I had done very little with respect to the industry. And so I actually think it's been really neat, for me and for the HousingWire as a company, for me to approach it with a fresh set of eyes. With always the bias of like, we're rooting for the industry, and we really want real estate agents and loan originators and all the other housing professionals to be successful. So that's our bias. But other than that, I really discovered pretty quickly that, from my perspective, the folks who are growing and disrupting in the industry aren't thinking about the industry in terms of silos. They're thinking about it across real estate, mortgage, title, valuation, even into home building on one side, multifamily on the other. It's a very holistic view of what is happening. And so a lot of what we've been doing over the past several years with our events, with the way our newsroom covers the industry, is what is our superpower? And I think our superpower is we're really good at giving you the holistic, all things housing perspective and making sure that, even if you're like a real estate professional and mostly you're focused on that, what's going on with mortgage rates and with your loan originator partners. So that has been one way that we've really been betting on our content is to think about things holistically. And then the other thing that I talked about this before, the data. Wow, like housing market data, homes available for sale, mortgage rates, home prices. How do all those things come together to create the housing market? I think that whole process, all the inputs, all the data is just fascinating. And it's actually like kind of complicated. So unpacking that for the industry and helping, the person who isn't a data analyst, still be successful with data and helping them incorporate that into their business. That's a big focus for us. So, I would say all things housing and data are like our North Stars.
Yeah. Marc, I know you predicted the rate environment for the year. I'll, put you on the hot seat here towards the end. Do you have any other things that you're looking at, either the very next milestone or indicator that you would like to see, or what you would predict for 2025? And then Diego will end on you as well. So Marc, why don't you go first? Is there anything that you're looking for next that's going to be an important indicator?
I think the number one thing is understanding what the change in what's happening in the policies, right? Call it for what it is. The policies are going to drive a lot of what's about to happen. Understanding what the tariffs really mean, understanding what they really mean and what he's trying to do. Understanding that there's going to be foreign money coming into buying that some of the bonds that are out there right now to lower, to get it ready for an IPO. I know people think I'm nuts on it, but I do have insider information on some of it where it absolutely is. He's utilizing tariffs to have the foreign governments of China, Canada and Mexico buying the bonds to lower it because he's got to clear the balance sheet in order for what he wants to do. I will tell you, his administration, it's the number one task right now is the housing market, which obviously drives the economic conditions. So if I'm a betting person right now, I'm gonna look at, even though Diego and I differ on what the reason is and how it may lay out, I think we look at the same indicators as to why and then how it shakes out. So even though him and I are probably polar opposites from that, and I think the other thing too, Jeremy, is it's not political. I don't want to see anybody leave the US, right? It's not like I'm sitting here advocating, get rid of people like that. That's not at all what I'm advocating at all. I don't look at that side of it from a political standpoint. I look at it from, we got to be prepared for what happens when it does, right? Because to me, it's that business isn't politics. Business is about understanding how to get to where you want to go. And that's part of this whole thing. And I think we'd all agree some of this stuff that's happening will impact whether rates skyrocket or whether they go down, right? That one of us is going to be right. It's not going to be a middle ground. It's going to go either this way or it's going to go this way.
Yeah, Jeremy, I agree with Marc. That's the biggest story. I think the second biggest story is you have companies like Mr. Cooper, like NewRez, like Rocket, like UWM, that are doing really interesting things with technology, including AI,
Yep.
that are going to position them and already have positioned them really well for when rates go down. So I think we're going to see companies like that take a lot more of the refinancing pie whenever rates do go down. And I think that's going to be a big story. I don't think a lot of lenders are prepared for how much business
I'm
they're going to lose.
Back off of that.
Yeah.
Jeremy, because we're focused on AI right now. We focused on robotics, the machine learning and everything else during COVID. I will tell you right now, those that are ready for that will be ready no matter what happens, and when it happens, they'll be ready for it. And that's going to be the key, because you may be able to right now, just even if you're breaking even or making some money, that's a good sign, right? But when you're ready for that, that's when you're making bank, and that's where you're able to continue to build off of that type of stuff too. So those that are really engaged in that and understand it are the ones that are really going to see through in 18 to 24 months, regardless of what happens.
Well, thank you both Diego, thanks for giving us a preview, getting to know us a little better and letting us talk to you here on RealEDGE, but then also getting ready for the Economic Summit. So the HousingWire Economic Summit on Wednesday, February 26th. We're really looking forward to it, and glad we could foreshadow it. And then I know there'll be a ton coming out of that we'll keep talking about and obviously interacting on. So thanks again, Diego, for being here.
Guys, this was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Diego. Appreciate you.